讀呢一段經文。
So we're going to use a short time to just go through this passage.
因為今日咧，我哋有見證嘅時間。
Because we're going to have testimonies later.
仲有慶祝一齊嚟到食飯嘅時間。
And also the celebration and the luncheon to celebrate.
除咗因為新年咧，仲有特別嘅原因。
And in addition to, because it's New Year, there's other reasons too.
咁我平時都冇乜機會同大家講關於基督徒對於婚姻嘅睇法。
And normally I don't have opportunities to talk to you about how Christians should look at marriage.
咁到咗要結婚嗰一日，同人哋證婚咧又太遲啦。
So then wait till the time that I have to conduct the wedding ceremony, it might be too late.
所以咧今日好好嘅機會同大家分享呢一段。
So then today I use this opportunity to share with you.
咁我哋恭賀人哋結婚咧，都係話天作之合啊。
And so when we congratulate other people, on their marriage, we say, "Oh, it's God. God made it this."
但係事實上咧，婚姻呢一個制度咧，係人類最早嘅一個制度。
But actually, this is a very early plan for human.
因為係上帝所設立嘅。
And because it is designed by God.
我哋剛剛所讀嘅經文咧，至少話俾我哋聽呢三件事。
And from the passage we just read, at least it told us three things. These three things.
第一件事咧，婚姻係上帝所設立嘅。
And first thing is that it is God created marriage.
神創造一個男人，創造一個女人，然後叫佢哋結合。
So He made a man and a woman and asked them to be together.
咁人類就係咁樣繁衍落嚟啦。
And this is how the human race reproduce.
然後神咧係會配合人嘅婚姻。
And also God matches marriage.
因為神將呢個女人帶到呢個男人面前。
Because God brought this woman in the presence of the man.
咁你話點解唔係神將呢個男人帶到個女人面前咧
Then you wonder why didn't God lead the man to the presence of the woman?
因為咧先創造男人。
And because He created men first.
第三咧就係神咧係喺處見證住婚姻嘅。
And thirdly, that God He witnesses marriage.
大家如果去法庭結婚咧，
So if you get married at a court,
咁證婚嘅官員咧就話：我而家憑住加州政府俾我嘅權力咧，就宣佈你哋係夫妻啦。
then the official would say, "I now pronounce you men and women according to the law of California."
佢可以宣佈你係夫妻，亦都可以宣佈你唔係夫妻啦。
So then he could pronounce you guys couple or not.
所以不如話我而家係奉上帝嘅名字宣佈你係夫妻啦。
So then it's better to say that now I pronounce you men and women in God's name.
因為你就要向上帝負責啦。
Because then you need to be responsible to God.
咁第一件事咧就係神係設立婚姻嘅。
So first thing is that God He created marriage.
第18節嗰度話：耶和華神說，那人獨居不好。
So in verse 18, the Lord God said, "It is not good for men to be alone."
咁聖經新約裏邊咧就講到咧，男又唔可以冇女，女又唔可以冇男嘅。
So in the New Testament, it did say that men need a woman and women need a man.
有一節嘅聖經咧就係話男人唔係為女人做嘅。
So there was a passage that says men were not created for women.
女人咧係為男人做嘅。
And yet women are created for men.
假如我哋對呢一節嘅經文係誤解咗咧，
So if we misunderstood this passage,
你就會以為咧女人係男人嘅附屬品。
then you might think that women just belong to men.
因為要滿足我所以你就係被創造啦。
And it's to just satisfy the men.
就唔係咁樣解嘅。
And that's not so.
佢解釋咧就係話，因為你男人唔好。
And the explanation is that because man is not good.
男人憑住自己係唔足夠。
And because he is insufficient by himself.
有缺點。
There is fault.
有缺乏。
There is insufficiency.
所以神咧就可憐呢個男人。
And God just have mercy on the man.
就做一個女人俾佢。
So then He made women for him.
就唔係因為咧呢個男人好好，所以神咧就送個女人俾佢。
And it's not because that he is very good.
因為你唔好。
It's because you're not good.
那人獨居不好。
So it says it is not good for him to be alone.
咁神咧就唔會做唔好嘅事嘅。
And of course, God will not do bad things.
所以咧見你咁可憐，就俾個伴偶你啦。
So then he has mercy on the man, and therefore He created the spouse.
使到你咧唔再過住啲唔好嘅生活啦。
So then you will not be living in by yourself anymore.
所以神咧好愛我哋嚇。
So God really loves us.
咁另外咧， 做一個配偶嚟做咩呢？
So another reason why we needed a spouse.
第20節嗰度話嗰個人冇遇見配偶嚟幫助佢。
And in verse 20, it says that he did not find a suitable helper.
傳道書嗰度話兩個人總比一個人好。
And in Proverbs, it says there's always two is better than one.
呢個人跌倒，另外一個人可以扶持佢。
So that when one falls, the other can help him up.
又話三根合成嘅繩子係不容易折斷。
And also to say that, when three ropes together, it's hard to break.
又話有人攻擊一個人嘅時候，如果佢有同伴呢，就可以一齊嚟抵擋。
And also when someone attacks a person and that person has company, then they could, fight together.
係嚟到互相嘅幫助。
And they could help each other.
所以婚姻係因為神愛人，所以神設立婚姻。
And marriage is because God loved people, loved us. That's why He created marriage.
彼得前書嗰度話，夫妻係一同嚟到承受恩典嘅。
And in 1 Peter, it says that the husband and wife, they both come into the grace of God.
大家都需要主嘅恩典。
And they both need the grace of God.
我時間好快啦嚇。其次咧就係講神係會為我哋嚟到配合。
And secondly, it says that God, He matches marriage.
咁神創造咗呢個女人之後咧，
So after God created this woman,
第22節話神就將呢個女人咧帶到嗰個人面前。
then it says in verse 22 that He brought her to the man.
係神會帶領佢哋。
That God will lead them.
所以箴言18章嗰度話咧。
So therefore, in Proverbs, verse 18, it says
第18章話咧，如果一個人咧得到一個賢妻啊，
that if someone has a good wife,
咩叫賢妻？就係 noble character， 即係呢個品格好好嘅妻子啊，
and a wife with noble characters,
就係神嘅恩賜嚟嘅。
then it is God's grace.
一個人如果得到賢妻係神嘅恩典。
And so for someone who has a wife with noble character, it is God's blessings.
喺世界上幾十億嘅人口，神就係將一個恩典嚟帶到你嘅面前，俾你遇到佢。
And of the millions and thousands of people in the world, that God lead this particular
你話點
person
解我都
to you.
冇遇到嘅？
Then you wonder, how come I haven't met her?
因為你冇祈禱。
Because you didn't pray.
喺創世記裏邊講到以撒娶利百加。
And then in Isaiah, when you talk about,
喺創世記裏
in
邊，
Genesis, when you talk about Isaac,
亞伯拉罕為佢嘅兒子嚟到尋找妻子，
that Abraham was looking for a wife for his son.
託付一位老嘅僕人，
And he asked one of his old servant to do this.
幫佢去尋找。
And to ask the servant to help him search for this woman.
佢話：你唔好娶本地嘅人為妻，
And he said, do not take the ones that are local here.
要去翻去我鄉下娶妻子。
That you have to find her from, where I'm from, where I'm originally from.
呢一個嘅老僕人就一面祈禱，
So this old servant, he would pray.
一面嘅尋求印證。
And then he would search and he would pray for affirmation.
於是佢後來為以撒揾到呢一個妻子。
And so later on, he was able to find the
咁以撒
wife
都
for
好
Isaac.
愛佢嘅妻子。
And of course, Isaac, he loves his wife.
所以神配合婚姻，婚姻係神嘅恩賜啊！
So God, he matches marriage and it is God's blessings.
我哋要為神所賜俾我哋嘅嚟到感謝神，
And so we need to thank God for what he has given us.
因為唔通我哋咁叻，識得揾得到咁好嘅妻子咩？
And because you think that we are so good that we find the perfect wife
如果你以為
ourselves.
自己揾到一個好好嘅妻子，
So if you think that you found a perfect wife,
係你自己嘅努力，
that it's all because of your effort,
有一個問題。
then there's a problem.
你話係我自己揾嘅，
Then you say, I found her myself.
過咗好多年之後，你發覺你想揾另外一個妻子，
Then many years later, you felt that you wanted to
但
find
係你
another
話如
wife.
果呢個係神賜俾我嘅，
But yet, if you think that this is what God has given me,
你就知道你要去珍惜。
then you know that you need to treasure.
呢個人係呢個女人係由男人嘅一根肋骨做出嚟嚇。
So this woman was created out of a man's rib.
大家男人摸一下，你咪少咗一根肋骨咧？
So the men, you could touch yourself and see, are you
Oh,
missing one rib?
兩
Maybe
邊都係
not,
應該一樣喎。
because both sides should be balanced.
咁點解要咁樣做呢？
Then why it has to be done this way?
點解有人話點解唔用頭骨嚟做呢？
Then some people say, why don't they use a
點解
bone
唔
from
用
head
腳趾嚟做呢？
or from the toe?
因為呢，就唔要個太太嚟管理啊，
And because they don't want the woman the wife to be ruling over the
又唔
husband,
要你踩個太太。
and yet you don't want the husband to be stepping over the wife.
肋骨係你最會保護嘅地方，
And the rib is where you protect.
係你嘅心臟嘅地方，
And that's where your heart is.
係你要愛惜嘅地方。
And somewhere that you need to treasure.
所以
Therefore,
神用男人嘅肋骨嚟做咗女人。
God used a man's rib, one of the ribs, to create the woman.
呢個男人都知道，
And even the man he
佢
knew.
話佢係我骨中嘅骨，
And
肉中嘅肉，
And he said, this is now the bone of my bones and flesh of my
叫
flesh.
佢做女人。
And she shall be called woman.
即係話呢個男人係好愛呢個女人，
And that means this man, he loves this woman.
愛到好似愛自己一樣。
And just like as if he loved himself.
咁我哋有冇愛太太好似愛自己一樣呢？
And do you love your wife just like
係
you
食
love
剩嗰啲
yourself?
俾佢食啦，
Or I give him what's left over?
一話自己唔食都俾佢食呢？
Or you just don't eat and let her eat first?
有冇對好似自己嘅骨肉一樣呢？
And do you treat it just like your own flesh?
喺哥林多前書11章話，
And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 it says,
我話俾大家聽之前呢，
and before I tell you,
大家有冇聽過？
and have you heard,
男人係呢一個家嘅頭，
that man is the head of the house,
女人係呢個頭下邊嗰條頸。
and then the woman is the neck that holds
你
the
係
head.
頭，但係個頭向邊度由我決定。
So you're the head, but wherever you turn, it's the woman's decision.
男人做大事，
That the men would do the
女
big
人
thing,
做細事。
the women would take care of the little things.
乜嘢係大事？咩又細事？
But
由我決定。
But yet, what's the big thing or is the small thing that the women
呢
would
都唔係
decide?
聖經講嘅。
And this is not what the Bible
咁
says.
聖經點講呢？
So what did the Bible
聖
say?
經喺哥林多前書11章嗰度講，
And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 it says,
女人係男人嘅榮耀。
that women is the glory of men.
我哋中國人咧中意貶低自己嘅妻子，
So for Chinese people, we want to put down our wives.
糟糠之妻，
So to, not to
賤內
use terms that's not so
我嘅女人
uplifting.
但係妻子係丈夫嘅榮耀。
But yet in here it says the wife is the man's glory.
如果男人係頭，
So if the man is the head,
女人係個皇冠，
and then the woman is the crown,
高過佢啊！
a little bit higher.
所以呢個男人佢係好愛呢個女人，
So this man, he really loves the
因為
woman.
係佢係我嘅骨，係我嘅肉，
And because she is my bone,
佢
and
係
she's
神
my
俾我
flesh,
嘅。
and she is given to me by God.
如果我哋要有好嘅婚姻，
So if we do want to have good marriage,
我哋祈求主賜俾我哋。
then we need to pray
最後，
to ask for God.
婚姻咧係神所見證嘅，
And lastly, that God, he witnesses marriage.
牧師同你證婚，法官同你證婚，唔會好啲㗎啊！
And so even a pastor or like a court officials to do the ceremony, it doesn't do any better.
神見證你嘅婚姻之後，
Because God, he needs to be the one that witnesses your marriage.
於是神就當時世界上只有一個男人，一個女人，
So at that time in the world, there was only one man and one woman.
於是證婚嘅就係神自己。
So that, of course, God, he witnessed this marriage.
喺第24節嗰度講，
And in verse 22, it says
人要離開父母，
that a man shall leave the family.
咁人係咪一定要唔同爸爸媽媽住呢？
So does it mean that you need to leave and not live with your parents
好多
anymore?
年青人都係好 eager 要離開爸爸媽媽。
So a lot of young people, they are so eager to leave the parents.
我問嗰啲高中生：你畢咗業去邊度讀大學啊？
So I asked some high schooler, after you graduate, where do
越
you go?
遠越好啊！
So the answer is the farther
總
the
之就唔
best.
喺呢度住就得啦。
As long as I don't live at home.
咁係咪咁解呢？
So does it mean
就唔係咁
this
解。
way? Not so.
離開父母嘅意思即係你要自己獨立啦。
So in here, it just means you need to be independent.
喺十誡裏邊，
In one of the 10 commandments,
第5誡，
the 5th one,
人要孝敬父母。
that we need to honor our
你話我已
parents.
經離開父母就唔使孝敬㗎啦。
Then you say, once I leave them, then I probably don't need to honor them anymore.
上帝唔會攞自己一條誡命去廢棄另外一條誡命。
But God will not contradict one of His command against the other.
所以話人要離開父母嘅意思，
So when He said that men shall leave the parents,
唔係就唔使孝敬父母啦，
it doesn't mean that you don't have to honor
而
them.
係你多咗一個責任啫。
It's just that you have one more
所以
responsibility.
一個丈夫一個妻子，
And so it shall be one husband, one wife,
唔係一個丈夫幾個妻子。
and not to have one husband and many wives.
與妻子聯合二人成為一體，
And then for them to become one flesh,
一個男一個女。
one man and one woman.
你話而家唔係咁嘅
Now
喎，
you say it's not like this
而
anymore.
家好多唔同嘅款式嘅
So
噃，
there are many different styles,
法律都准許啊。
and even law allows it.
耶穌講一句説話，
And yet Jesus
耶
said,
穌嗰個時代都係有人休妻嘅。
and even at that time there were people who kind of send their wives away.
即係而家叫離婚啊嚇。
They have divorce.
但係耶穌喺馬太福音19章嗰度話，
And yet, when Jesus in Matthew chapter 19,
佢
he
話
said
起初不是這樣，
that he said it was not like that in the
唔
beginning.
係咁樣嘅。
It was not so.
2000年前人已經將婚姻搞亂咗啦。
And even 2,000 some years ago, men has messed up with the marriage.
嗰個時候都有人係離開妻子嘅，叫妻子離開。
And even those times, there are people who divorce the wife.
我哋中國人有7出之條，
And then for Chinese, we have the 7
做
rules.
咗呢7樣唔好嘅嘢，其中一樣呢，我就可以唔要你啦。
So if the wives, could not do one of these 7 things, then the husband could legally divorce them.
咁猶太人當中都自己定咗一啲條例呢，係可以離棄妻子嘅。
And even the Jews, they also make some laws that they could divorce the wife.
傳說最嚴重嘅一項
And was this one of them that was said to be the most
就係
serious?
煮飯燶咗，
And he said if they cook and they burn the food,
都係有咁樣嘅根據。
and there was this law.
起初不是這樣，
But yet it was not like
耶
this.
穌話起初不是這樣，
But Jesus said it wasn't like this in the beginning.
但係法律因為人堅持要咁樣，
But because men forced to have certain ways,
所以法律就定咗離婚嘅條例，
and therefore the law he created
唔
divorces
係神嘅意
rules,
思。
and it's not God's way.
最後佢話二人就聯合成為一體啊！
And lastly, it says two will become one.
咁已經成為一體係點分開呢？
So you said if they become one flesh, how could they be separated
呢
again?
個成為一體，
And this become one
唔
flesh,
單止係肉體上成為一體，
and not just physically that they
而
are.
係兩個人根本就成為咗一個人。
And it's to say that they both two people become one person.
喺馬拉基書嗰度講，
In the book of Malachi, it says,
神喺你同埋你嘅妻子之間作見證。
and it's to say that God will be the witness between you and your wife.
大家可能以前冇睇過呢一次聖
And
經。
maybe you have not read this chapter before, this passage
佢話
before.
你唔好離棄你幼年嘅妻，
And it says,
唔好離棄你年青嘅時候娶嘅妻
it
子。
says that you shall not leave the wife of your youth.
喺馬拉基書嘅2章14節，
And it's in Malachi chapter 2, verse 14.
神喺你同埋你幼年所娶嘅妻中間作見證。
And then God, He is the witness between you and the wife that you married at her youth.
神喺婚姻中間做見證，
And God is the witness of your marriage,
佢係你嘅配偶，
that she is your spouse.
係你盟約嘅妻。
And she is the one that of your marriage covenant.
人生當中冇一個嘅約定比呢個更大啦。
And there's no other covenant in life that's more important than this one.
你話婚姻不過一張紙啫嘛，
Then some people say marriage is just a piece of paper.
婚姻係喺神面前嘅盟約，
But yet marriage in God's presence is a
神喺
covenant.
度做見證。
That God, He witnesses it.
所以其實關於婚姻仲有太多需要講嘅。
And so even with marriage, there's a lot more that I could share.
婚姻亦都係維持住呢一個嘅社會文明嘅制度嘅保障。
And marriage also help keep, the society.
你想一想，如果以後人廢棄咗婚姻，
And then if you think that in the future, if they just get rid of marriage,
呢個制度一旦冇咗，
then if this, get deleted out,
人與人之間冇一種嘅約束，
and then there is no such commitment or this relationship,
咁人會變成點？
and so how would this?
所以希伯來書最後一次聖經同大家講，希伯來書13章嗰度話咧，
So therefore, in Hebrews chapter 13, it says
婚姻人人都當尊重，
that marriage is someone that everyone should respect,
床也不可污穢，
and even the bed you cannot make it dirty.
尊重婚姻，
That you need to respect
人
marriage.
人都應該尊重，
That everyone needs
尊
to
重自
marriage.
己嘅婚姻，
That you respect your own marriage
尊重別人嘅婚姻，
and to respect others'
唔
marriage.
可以逾越界線。
And you cannot step over the boundaries.
呢個係神所設立嘅。
And this is what God set up.
你話講係咁講啦，
And you said, this is what we say.
我遇到嘅困難你唔知道，
But the challenges that I face, you don't know.
神係唔會俾我哋一條絕路嘅。
That God would not send us to the dead end.
馬丁路德講一句説話，
Martin Luther King, he said,
佢話婚姻係 a school of character， 係品格嘅學校。
that he said marriage is a school of character.
我諗好多嘅夫妻喺結咗婚多年之後咧，都係發覺咧，原來有好多嘢咧係要學習。
And I believe that after a couple they married for a long time, then they realize there's still a lot more to learn.
喺品格上嘅學習，
Maybe in characters.
婚姻其實係一個奧秘，
And marriage is actually a secret. A mystery.
係基督同教會之間嘅奧秘。
And it is a mystery between the Christ and the church.
人喺婚姻當中
Then when someone is in marriage,
係會學習到基督同教會之間嘅關係，
that they will learn also the relationship between Christ and church.
所以人應該向基督嚟到學習愛。
So therefore we should all learn from Christ about love.
多少嘅離婚係因為對對方已經冇咗愛，
And a lot of times divorce is because you don't love the other person
又
anymore.
再一次嘅證明人嘅愛係有限嘅。
And therefore it shows that men's love is very
如
limited.
果靠住自己嘅力量，總有不能忍受嘅地方。
And if it's only by our own effort, then there will be times that we cannot withstand anymore.
有啲人就離婚啦，
So then some will divorce.
多數嘅人會忍耐，
And some might try to endure.
但係忍得好辛苦，
But it would be very hard, very
因為
difficult.
佢哋嘅婚姻裏邊冇基督，
And because in the marriage there's no Christ.
冇愛嘅源頭，
And there's no source of love.
而人嘅愛係有限，
And yet love from humans is
人嘅
very
忍
limited.
耐亦係有限。
And men's endurance also limited.
所以以弗所書嗰度再一次講到婚姻嘅時候，
So then in the book of Ephesians, again, it mentioned about marriage.
佢話你哋做妻子嘅要順服自己嘅丈夫，如同順服主。
It says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord.
如果你要你嘅妻子順服你，
And if you want your wife to be submissive to you,
你鼓勵佢順服主啦，
then you will encourage her to be submissive to the
佢
Lord.
就會順服你。
Then she will be submissive to
如
you.
果個妻子係順服基督嘅，
And if the wife is submissive to the Lord,
佢都會按住基督嘅教訓嚟順服丈夫。
then she will use how she be submissive to Christ to be submissive to you.
又對丈夫話要愛自己嘅妻子，
And also to the husband, it says, husbands, love your wives,
好似基督愛教會，
just as Christ loved the church
為教會捨己。
and gave himself up for her.
如果你覺得丈夫唔夠愛你，
So if you feel that your husband doesn't love you enough,
你叫佢愛耶穌啦。
then you tell him to love Christ more.
如果佢有基督嘅愛，
Because if he has the love of Christ
佢學基督咁樣，
and he learned from Christ,
佢都會為你嚟捨己。
that he will also give up himself for
所
you.
以願神賜福俾各位，我哋每一個人嘅婚姻。
So may God bless each and every one of us and also our marriage.
願我哋邀請基督嚟到見證我哋嘅婚姻，
As we, invite God to witness our
保
marriage,
護我哋嘅婚姻，
to protect our
同
marriage,
埋豐富我哋嘅婚姻。
and to enrich our marriage.
因為婚姻係神所賜嘅禮物，
And because marriage is a gift from God,
係我哋學習嘅地方，
and it's a place where we learn,
係我哋享受主嘅恩典嘅地方。
and it's a place where we enjoy God's blessings.
邀請基督進入我哋嘅婚姻，
And so invite Christ into our marriage,
做我哋夫妻嘅主。
and to have Him be the Lord of the couple.
好，咁跟住呢，我哋就請一對剛剛結婚嘅嚟做見證啦。
So we want to ask newlyweds